Well, good morning. Thank you for coming to hear our little story here. I'm Sumant. I'm a partner at March Capital. We have an active investments in India as well as in the US. And so one of the things we've noticed recently is this new wave of Indian companies that are building products and that are globally competitive. And it's somewhat, I think yesterday we had a panel of 3 entrepreneurs from Israel who were talking about how their businesses have been built and how they transitioned into being US companies. I think India is a little bit behind in the curve there, but it's coming together really well. So we have a great panel today of 3 companies, 3 founders, CEOs who are in different stages of that transition. So maybe we'll start on that end and
Sure.
Saahil, tell people what you're doing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Saahil. I'm a co-founder and CEO at Shiprocket. Shiprocket is a logistics technology platform that works with small and medium-sized businesses in India. And while we're scaling extremely fast in India and we're building really deep, we are on that journey, I think, at a zero at the moment. We're still figuring out which markets outside of India make sense. And obviously, US is one of the deepest markets, but we're still very, very early in our research.
So Sahil, his business, which is basically helping small and medium commerce companies, merchants get online and get into the e-commerce, growing what, 10% a month, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
But only in India today.
Yes.
My name is Vinod. I head growth and go-to-market at Cisco's contact center business, and I'm not here because of that. I'm here because I got off the boat in 2017, moved here, ran a startup called CloudCherry, which is a customer experience management startup that was acquired by Cisco last quarter.
It started in India.
Started in India, moved here early 2017,
Yeah.
and exited last quarter. So.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Umesh, Sachdev, founder CEO of Uniphore, a company that I co-founded in India 12 years ago, in 2008. We do AI and automation to transform call centers, customer experience. I moved to the US in the Bay Area in 2018. We converted our global headquarters, moved it from India to Palo Alto. Most of my leadership team is now in the Bay Area. We are, in terms of stage, going between Series C to D, so growth stage company.
And tripling every year.
Tripling every year.
Doing very well. So let's talk, maybe with you as a starting point, because you've been here the longest of the 3. I've been here for 22 years. So I've been here longer than all 3 of you combined. What was the reason for you to think about moving here? What was the reason for you to not build a business here by being in India? What drove that and how did that go?
Pretty simple. I think when we started, we thought global SMB was the market we wanted to go after. That very quickly changed, and we realized that for enterprise businesses, you just need to be close to your customers. And when we looked at the one large homogeneous market that exists, it's hardly a secret that it is the US. And as we raised our Series A, the investors were completely aligned that we need to move our company to the US, move the leadership.
And the investors were Indian investors?
Indian investors, okay, who had complete conviction, including Cisco, which came in that round, but had complete conviction that the company needs to be based in the US.
Was the thesis when they invested a US market thesis?
The interesting part is that time the thesis was a global SMB, US-centric global SMB hypothesis. But almost as the funding was closing, we discovered that enterprise is where the value lay. But they stuck with that, with the conviction on the company.
Yeah, and so the transition was Indian structure, US entity, you moved here, and what was next? What happened?
So when I moved here, I always say I moved here with a suitcase, a cricket kit, because I love playing cricket, and one customer in Arizona who I still haven't met. So, true story. I thought the first thing I'm going to do is, when I was on that flight, I literally told myself, so you're going to land, and what are you going to do next? There's nothing.
Did you know people on the ground?
Nobody. I'm one of the only Indians who doesn't have family in the US. See, everyone relates to that at some degree. No family, one customer, no friends. And in a week, I had somebody co-sign my car lease who just met me when I landed.
Wow.
Because I didn't have credit history. So that worked out pretty well for me. I just paid off that car last month. He's a good guy. It was cold turkey move, and it kind of worked out.
Yeah. So Umesh, for you, you transitioned here a little bit later in the life of the company. What was that? What was the thesis behind that? Tell us a little bit about that.
So our thesis developed about 5 or 6 years ago. Interestingly, in our life, we used a banker to raise our A round, and B and C we did on our own. So the big benefit that we had with the banker in the A round is we got a lot of market data, which opened our eyes. And when you look at the TAM for any software, enterprise software, let alone contact centers, US is 50%, and rest of the world is 50%. And that's staggering. So it was very clear to us early on in our life that at some stage, if we really want to be a big player in our industry, we have to win US. We can't ignore it. But we delayed that because I was also clear that this is also going to be the most competitive market ever that we will get into. It's one thing to win in Asia and India. It's quite another to come where our biggest competitors are headquartered and have stranglehold.
Multi-billion-dollar companies.
Multi-billion-dollar companies, enterprise relationships. It's not easy to uproot that. And so I wanted three things to happen. I wanted enough fuel in the tank in the way of capital, which happened after our B round, once John Chambers had invested. I wanted to make sure to myself that, not only did we have a good product, but in one or two areas we had dramatically better products so that our breaking out is easier and getting into these enterprises is easier. And the third one was more personal. I knew that unlike many other parts of the world where we had expanded into, I could not have hired an executive and expanded into the market, given how high the stakes were going to be in the US. Plus, before Vinod and I kind of moved, there are other examples of Indian SaaS companies who sent a CTO co-founder or COO co-founder and didn't work, and they had to pull back. So I knew that wasn't an option for me. It could have been fatal. So I knew I had to move, and all three things fell into place in 2018, 2017. We raised our B round. John Chambers came in as an investor, but also a coach. And he was, Mike Milken said to him the other day that you're a human safety net to your investing companies. And that really is true, because I was at his house one day and we were discussing, should I move or not? And he said, just move, I'm here.
You said sure?
I said, sure.
Do you have a room in the house?
Well, I knew that his house is very big. Even if I hide, he won't know. Yeah. But, I did the move. Unlike Vinod, I had the benefit. Vinod and I have been friends from India. I had the benefit of calling him and saying, how was your move? Which schools did your kids go to? How did you pick which city to live in? True story, when I came in, his wife drove me to my DMV test for the driver's license. And he came with me to Bank of America as a reference to open my bank account. So I had the template. I was fortunate in that sense. I couldn't go to his friend who signed his co-lease, but it worked out for me.
He still wears better shoes than you wear.
Well, he's always been the fashionable one. Plus, now he has more money.
Saahil, your business is very Indian today. So talk a little bit about what makes that business work there, and if you were to take that business outside of India, what would make that successful?
So I think, we have built for a certain kind of market, while the underlying technology obviously is extendable. By that I mean, let's say, integrations into various global carriers, integrations into channels. But the business model today works for the long tail of sellers, which obviously India is big on. I mean, they exist in the US and other parts of the world as well. But it's still very nuanced in some ways, where cash on delivery is still 70% of how Indian e-commerce works. So as a fulfillment partner, we are also a payment partner, right? Which is not true in the US. So I think
just to explain to everyone, cash on delivery means then someone buys something from Amazon in India, they come to your house with the package, and someone hands you that cash to take the package. So there's no electronic payments. Is still less than 10% of all the volume of payments in India.
Right. And then for the sellers that we work with, and we work with over 50,000 of those sellers in India, it's a huge hassle, right? Reconciliation, last mile, making sure that things get there on time, returns, all of that stuff is a problem. So while at a macro level, the problems are similar in the United States, whatever research we've had, and I went to school here, I lived here for a few years, so I have some context. But at the same time, as you think about what really have we built, which is unique, I wonder, how, and, in terms of, do we adapt this platform to, let's say, the enterprise customer segment here? Do we replicate part of the platform and bring it here and then build the rest in the US? In terms of what customer segment do we go after? How is the competitive landscape? Am I going to be able to make the same margins? What happens to my business overall? those are some questions that I think we need to answer over the next few months, as we start to think about exploring this market further.
So I think there are nuances, and I think what, again, India and Israel, the contrast really is that you can build a company in India for the Indian market. And there is enough of a market, enough people there to pay you for something, that you don't necessarily have to go outside of India. In Israel, if you build a company, I mean, there's 5 big customers, and after that, you have to find some way to get to the US, and which has been tested and proven over the last 20 years, and he's done very well. You came here with having built a business in India and then Southeast Asia, and then you came to the US. What was the learnings of that?
So a few things I was already conscious by talking to other entrepreneurs who had either succeeded or not in this move from India. I was very clear that, and consciously, I had to redo my product market fit, even though we had also sold to some US customers through channels sitting in India. I knew that the first few customers I had to go myself, meet, and consciously redo the product market fit. And that's how it happened. We got really lucky. Our first big customer was the largest health insurer in the world. And they looked at our product, and my pitch to them was, don't look at our product, but tell us how would you use it, and what will be the ROI to you if this were to work. And that helped us develop a capability which has become our largest selling capability, not just in the US, but other developed.
What was that? Give an example.
So we were doing speech analytics in call centers. So basically, in call centers, what happens is your call is always recorded for quality purposes. We are told this at the beginning of every call, which means at the end of the day, at the end of the month, there's a team of quality analysts who listen to a sample of these calls to figure out what was good or bad. So we have developed a software capability which, using speech to text and natural language and AI, could go through that software recording, and we had made it work real time. But it was basically doing analytics and giving insights. The first customer that we met, they said, this is great capability, but can you extend that to do some automation, which means don't just give me the insights, can your software write a summary of what happened in the call? And we said, well, we haven't done it, what would you do with that? And they said, look, it's a huge cost for us. At the end of the call, it takes our representatives 1.5 minutes to do the summary. Now, 1.5 minutes, I didn't understand the context. In India, when the call center wage rates of the average worker is 1/4 that of the call center worker in the US, 1.5 minutes doesn't cost that much. But 1.5 minutes for 17,000 reps all working in the US was $7 million of cost, that 1.5 minutes. And so what the customer was telling me was to extend the software to automate that segment, and it could be millions of dollars of saving. So that's an example of how
the needs and maturities of markets are different. So even if you've been successful in, say, a market in Asia, it's not necessarily a perfect fit for that here, because as Umesh is saying, the cost of human capital in that part of the world is so much lower. You have to really think about what you're doing and adding value to your customers, which is different. I have an interesting question for you. What the heck is a chief growth officer?
It's a that's not on the script, but anyway, I will answer that. So every time I introduce myself, and we do a lot of presentations at Cisco, the moment I introduce myself, there's this look in the audience as to what do you do. So I always tell them it's such an important job that nobody else wanted it. It's all of growth and go-to-market, sales, marketing, sales enablement, everything.
So you have a job where you have no quotas, you have no responsibilities, you have no
it's actually the other way around.
Reports.
Cisco is such a matrixed organization. There's a central sales organization.
And they pay you a salary.
And yet I own the sales quota. So the sales team works for me but doesn't report to me, but I own the fulfillment of the quota.
So if you don't meet the quotas, you don't get paid?
I have nobody to beat up, basically. And yet it's my failing.
Okay, so coming back on track, talk about your first few hires and what the dynamic of that was. As an Indian company coming to the US, you didn't have any relationships.
Awesome.
What happened?
I think, no secret, the founder's job is sales, to sell to investors, employees, customers, whatever. But selling to employees is the most underrated selling skill. Now, when you come fresh off the boat, if I start my next startup, I know my first 50 hires, I kid you not. Till the 50th employee, I know by name, right? I knew nobody in the US. And so the first hire was really, you had to spread the dragnet, references, a firm, and this and that. And you had to sell why they should come to you. You were a Series A company, no customers in the US, nobody knew you. So literally you were selling to a senior exec why they should work with you and for you, right?
And so what worked?
So the first person we hired, who was a phenomenal hire that turned out to be a bad hire 2 years later, but that person had to be hard sold White Cloud Cherry, right? And she said the single biggest reason was, I'm like, okay, I'm willing to be in the trenches with this guy, right? and it literally was a
So
personal,
it's really a personal sell.
100%.
Yeah. Umesh, what was it like for you?
Very similar. I'm a slightly better sales guy than Vinod. No, but
I
very
have to
similar.
invent a new title for you.
Very similar process. I had to go through investor networks. I was very clear that I wanted to go through networks and not a search firm, especially for my executive team, because trust was a big thing that I was going after, culture fit, etc. Of course, John, Pankaj, you, everyone kind of opened the Rolodex of people. One of the strategies that worked for me is not the final candidate for each position. This is only the C-level execs, but the short list of the last two, the interviews were happening in John's living room, both because I had one more feedback and validation on the candidate, but once John and I knew we wanted to go after somebody, it wasn't just me, but also
Could
John.
use him to sell for you.
John's credibility was also being used on it,
And Pankaj, who's sitting.
and Pankaj. And
Pankaj, what was your title at Cisco? I'm just curious what title Cisco gives people.
Was not the chief growth officer.
It's a unique title, I give you that.
Saahil, shifting a little bit, talk about the startup ecosystem, investor ecosystem, VC ecosystem in India. What is that like now? What was it like 5 years ago? Where do you see that going?
I think it's dramatically changed. One of my early stage investors is actually in the audience, Rajan, and this was when literally there were maybe 10 funds or 20 funds that you could go and meet. And I'm talking about Series A angel. I'm not even talking about later stage. And when we started out our company back in 2012, there were no incubators or there were no other people to go and seek advice. There were no founders, because it was something where your parents would look at you quizzically saying that are you sure you have a real job? Like what the hell are you doing, right?
But just to put that in context, when we started doing business in India 15 years ago, we couldn't hire anyone. And we would talk to these engineers and say, why? And they said, well, if I go work for a company that has no name, I don't think I can get married.
Married, yeah.
True story.
Which is true, right? Because
That's culturally what happens.
the perception just wasn't there. Like, it was considered to be that you probably couldn't make it in a job and now you're just going to waste everyone's time, right? So kind of fighting that into, then seeing a bunch of newer startups come around and then a bunch of newer funds come around. I think from there till today has been a pretty tremendous journey, right? Today, India is booming as a market. There's a lot of global capital, from all over the world. There's a lot of Indian capital getting put to work as well. Exits are a little slow, but they are happening, right? Finally, right? Walmart, Flipkart.
Well, India is,
a big one.
one thing people don't realize or don't think about, there's a population of 1.3 billion people, but there's 600,000 new engineering graduates every year.
Yeah.
And really top-class engineering graduates. And so having access to that talent is exceptionally important. So if, Pankaj, you had 80,000 people or something? Well, how many people did you have in your organization in Bangalore?
In Bangalore, engineering was 8,000.
8,000.
8,000 for me directly, and then the partners like Tata, Infosys, and
So-
others were about another 10 to 11.
So for Cisco, they outsourced 20,000 employees to India in the engineering, whether they were their own employees or they were outsourced. And so I think that's a unique advantage for the country. The other is it's English speaking.
Exactly.
For sure.
Somewhat, not American speaking, but English speaking. Right, Umesh? What did you use, chuck and cheese or something? Chalk and cheese. Which I've never heard of before.
you should Google it, it's a real thing.
All right, let's talk about the future, Umesh. What's next for you?
So, look, I didn't realize that in 2018, which was our first year of 3x growth, and we had been doing the company for 9 years, I didn't realize that this could sustain, and it's truly a market inflection for us. Enough for, without being prompted, we signed up for another year of 3x in fiscal 21. The board would have been happy, and I'm sure you would have been happy for much more.
I'm on the board of this company.
But we generally see the market opportunity, and we actually thought we were conservative on that number. So we are in a very large market opportunity. It's a $350 billion opportunity, of which $200 billion is the human capital, which is being disrupted with AI and automation in call centers. With the revenue growth, we are one among the breakout companies now, allows us to raise more capital, raise faster, and truly be a segment leader in the in the space. So this is one that,
But also, you're opening new markets. You're thinking about Japan. You're thinking about Australia.
yeah, so we are, we've taken 12 years to open up 6 or 7 big markets. We are opening up 4 big markets in the same year: Canada, UK, Japan, Australia. Again, goes to show the bandwidth, the management bandwidth that we built in the company, the confidence of growth, and just the market opportunity. We don't want to be slow anymore. We want to press the pedal even harder. So this is one that both me, the leadership team, and I'm sure the board kind of agrees that has legs to build a large company, potentially go public. So that's how I'm beginning to think about the next few years.
I can tell you a little bit about being on a board of a startup. It's like, we used to joke that I don't know how many people have been to India. Any show of hands? Have you ever driven from Delhi to Agra to see the Taj? So the joke is you have many near-death experiences. But when you get there, it's worth it. Do you agree? That's what it feels like sitting on this board. All right, we're going to talk about a little bit about this US-India Business Council and what you guys are doing and what the intent is. Maybe just start with
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
So I'm extremely excited about this because the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum really brings big business and governments together, right? And we've come to acknowledge that the US-India technology partnership is the defining relationship of the 21st century, globally, amongst any 2 countries or blocks. So there needs to be more system, method, and process behind how these 2 countries engage at a startup and technology level.
Yeah.
So very, very privileged that John has committed so much time to
John
this.
is John Chambers. Yeah.
Okay, John Chambers, sorry. Yeah, there's many Johns around. So John Chambers, of course. And Umesh and I are co-chairing a program which really does 3 very simple things. First is to run policy advocacy between the 2 governments to make sure cross-border trade in the startup technology sector is easier.
Yeah.
Second is growth. How do you allow this? This should be a win-win for both countries. It cannot be a US.
Share some of the statistics. What have you learned?
Okay, so what we've learned is we had 5 startups in the room 3 weeks ago, 5 founders. Between the 5 of them, the market cap was $5 billion, private, of course. Each founder who moved created close to 90 local high-paying tech jobs here, right? That number was poised to double in the coming year. And this person is on an L1 visa, which is given for a year.
Everyone that moves here with an L1 visa, on average, creates about 100 to 150 jobs.
Exactly right.
In the US.
In the US, high-paying tech jobs. So
Yeah.
that
Translates to how many jobs in India?
So there's a 1:3 sort of a ratio, wherein that also does job creation in India,
yeah.
for the entire ecosystem to support the presence here. And it's an unbelievably solid business model.
The challenge in India is that right now with the population and how young it is, there needs to be 1 million plus new jobs created every month.
Every month,
To be able
1.2.
to get these people a wage. And it's a huge challenge for the country. So I think this is something you guys are working on, at
Very
least
excited.
making people aware of it.
Absolutely.
And what's the intent of all of that? What do you hope happens?
So as I said, this is the defining relationship, and we want to make sure that we catalyze that. It'll happen even if we try to stop it, I'll be honest with you. But the faster we get there, the more economic value we deliver to people on both sides of that spectrum, in the US and in India. And we can do anything we can do to accelerate it by a day, I think is a job well done.
And how many companies do you think that you are aware of that have the intention of doing this, or have even let's say the opportunity / should do it?
Every single Indian enterprise software as a service company. I only know B2B companies, right?
So how many
Every
are there?
single one. There's, our math is, it's in north of 10,000, 10 to 15,000 companies
Wow.
that can make this move over the next decade.
Well, let's say there's 50 to 100 companies that have generated $5 million to $20 million in that part of the world
Yeah.
that are now thinking of coming here. Would you say that's an accurate number?
100%, yeah.
And just to add to your point of what's the intention here, all of us got together and said, look, we are all super busy running our own companies and there's not even enough time for family. So for us to take out time, the intention was very clear. We said that our financial outcomes with our companies are now going to happen irrespective of whether we do this or not. But if we can accelerate the moment of those 500 to 1,000 next generation Indian SaaS startups to the US by both sharing our learnings, making the policy easier, then at least the next generation and potentially Vinod's next company would do even better.
Good. Well, I'm going to open it up for questions. We have a few. But please go ahead.
So you talked about US being the main target. When I think of India and I think of the rest of the world, I mean, there are other markets that could be going to Africa or other parts of Asia. Is that also part of your strategy? Because if all those startups come,
Let me repeat the question. I think I'll say it, why US and why not other places, and what's the plan for the rest of the world?
Yeah, you can start, Umesh.
Okay. So Uniphore today is present in 11 different countries. We're adding 4 more this year. So it is true that it's not just the US, but it's a global ambition that as an Indian company we had. US happens to be the largest market opportunity. And like I said, rest of the world put together is equal to the US opportunity.
For enterprise software, I think that's very accurate.
Yes, enterprise software.
On the B2C side, possibly where you were trying to lead us on the Africa side was developing countries look similar, potentially move together in terms of economic growth, and learnings from India could be translated into Africa. There are some business categories where that has happened. For example, mobile payments.
Actually, Sahil's company. Sahil, why don't you address the rest of the world?
Sure. No, so I think you're bang on. The demographics that exist in India, whether it is the payments or the wallet size or transaction size or the sheer scale of number of people actually makes us think, that would we rather, be better suited to serve a country like Indonesia, which is very similar to India, or Brazil for that matter, right? As opposed to the United States, where things are fairly different, right? Cost of labor, cost of living, all of those things are very different. So for a company like ours, we're a platform play. While we are software as a subscription, we are more as a
Infrastructure, yeah.
Yeah, we're more infrastructure for sellers. We help them do everything from invoicing to shipping to tracking to consumer experience, everything after the order. And those kind of companies which are more horizontal, targeted to a segment, are actually cropping up in some of the other economies which are non-Western. So definitely something that we are looking out for. Like I said, globalization for us
It kind of depends on
early.
your product and your market and where you find the best fit. Any other questions?
My name's Anthony. I run a business called Eagle Genomics, which is deep tech enterprise software. I've got 20 people in Hyderabad. I think I'm being a bit of a pioneer in kind of sourcing the very best engineering resource from Hyderabad to help me build a deep tech company. What's the perspective on deep tech?
First, I'll say Hyderabad has really good food, so you can enjoy your time there. The question was, what's the perspective on building a deep tech group of people, a team in Hyderabad? Any thoughts?
So I think deep tech talent is available aplenty in India. Not enough deep tech avenues to employ that talent, right? So that's the talent that moves here. So if you can offer employment which affords you the right compensation for that skill set, I think it's a phenomenally good move. Otherwise, the expectation is that the best deep tech talent moves here, and then everybody calls dibs on that. But going to source is probably a lower carbon footprint. So
The fun of being buddies.
I have one more question we have time for. Yes. What would be the impact on your business with instantaneous translation software?
On my business? Look, what we deal with fundamentally is unstructured voice data. That's what we're going after. The first step of getting a machine to understand it is convert first audio to text, or speech to text, then convert unstructured to structured. And then maybe if it's in a language that we don't understand, then translation comes as the next step. So translation is a problem that we are not focused on. We know that other companies are focused on. For a majority of the use cases in call centers, we haven't yet found huge relevance, but for consumer use cases, people, two people in different languages talking to each other, real-time translation is phenomenal. I think it's stuff of the future. We're probably 3 to 5 years away from very highly accurate real-time translation happening. But in our business and call centers, that's not yet, and never say never, but not yet a big use case.
I will say I'm way over time. All 3 of my panelists are here. Please feel free to grab them and ask them any questions. We're super excited about what we're seeing come out of India, and I really wanted to thank you all for taking the time to join us here. Thank you.
Thank you.